As well as that, please watch your head. Please watch out.
Oh, I see terrific.
Emma, you feeling dripping already? Nice and cool though.
Can't touch it though. Can't touch it. It's crazy, right?
Everybody in spot. You can see it up here and down here. The way dripstone works, it starts off with a little tiny hole in the ceiling that slowly drips water to the ground. And over time, this tiny hole in the ceiling develops into a stalactite. And it has a straw that goes all the way through and continues to drip water down to the floor. Meanwhile, on the floor will form a stalagmite. And the best way to tell the two apart is a stalactite will always hang tight to the ceiling. Meanwhile, a stalagmite, well, watch out or you might trip over it. It's quite a slow process, though, for these things to form. For a stalagmite to grow to even the size of a Hershey Kiss, not very big, it will take 500 years. Quite a while. But eventually they can meet in the middle in a formation known as a column. These are quite rare, but we'll get to see one later on our tour. And finally, this stalagmite in particular, we know as our ice cream cone. I'm sure you can all see it, the upside down cone, but unfortunately the ice cream spilling out on all sides. But now moving on to the next type of formation, over along this wall, we can see what is known as flowstone. And the way flowstone works is water will seep out through a tiny crack that goes all the way along the wall, and it'll go down over the wall, mimicking the shape of water. That's all there is to the formation, but the next thing I want to call your attention to is the difference in coloration. If we look all the way back here, or on our ice cream cone over here, it's very bright, even glossy. And that's how we want it to look. All formations are made of calcite, and this is its natural state. But meanwhile, this little area here has grown far darker. It's even starting to break up. And that's because back when those two farmers in 1871 would first make expeditions into the cave, every time they went in, they would rub their hands along the wall for good luck. Unfortunately, though, the oils and the moistures in your hand are bad for the formations. So over time, they slowly deteriorated the quality and brought it to the state in which it now resides. Additionally, if we look underneath, we can see a row of broken stalactites. And that's because when tours first began, they were very different. There was no gift shop outside. And so as a souvenir, they'd come in, they'd break up a stalactite, and they'd take it home. They thought they would grow back like icicles. They do go back like icicles after tens of thousands of years. Quite a while. And so for those reasons, we ask you, please don't touch anything so we can keep it in good shape for many years to come. And the final thing, Pennsylvania drivers, I know we're very familiar with these. We have two large potholes. And if we look at these as a pair of eyes, and then look for a big nose around the middle, and a long crack of a mouth with a tongue sticking out, we have our Crystal Cave monster. Don't worry though, he's more of a Sesame Street kind of monster. And now with all of that, one last thing I just want to point out. If you guys can all look right back here, we have a red light. These red lights are all throughout the cave, and they're known as wish lights. And that's because if you don't pay attention, and you bonk your head into this rock, well, you'll wish you have seen the light. So with that, we're going to move on to our next room.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, these are the red lights.
Let's fill in a bit more. We can all fit. This is our smallest room.
One right there.
All right. So welcome everybody to the storage room. Called that because back when those farmers were first exploring, they noticed, as I'm sure you're all noticing right now, it's very cold in here. Saw 54 degrees throughout the cave. So noticing that, they figured it would be a good spot to store their crops. What the farmers didn't notice is it's very wet in here. Because of that, instead of staying longer, their crops spoiled 2 to 3 times as fast. Not really what they were going for. But although those crops are gone, we still think we see the outline of some in the flowstone. Like all the way up top. We have our Crystal Cave green beans. A little bit below is our Crystal Cave carrot. And then all the way on the ground is the world's biggest portobello mushroom. And finally, if you're not a fan of all those veggies, that's alright. Because right over here we have Crystal Cave bacon.
It doesn't.
And the bacon in particular is very... You can also see it all the way up here. And the way it forms, it'll come through a tiny little hole up near the top, and it streaks down under the wall, making the unique stream shape that we see. As well as that, while you look up, you might notice there seem to be gaps in the ceiling. And that's because the ceiling of this room was originally a part of the ceiling of the actual cave until it fell during an 8 to a 9.0 magnitude earthquake to where it is now. And because of all that, it is known as quite simply, as a drop rock. We'll get to see more drop rocks though, and a better look at this massive drop rock later on in our tour. But the final part I know you've all been waiting for, the ominous, the scary red room. Oh, sorry to disappoint. It's nothing scary, it's nothing dangerous. It's one of many side passageways throughout the cave. It goes back about 125 feet back to underneath the theater we had started in. And the only reason we did not take it down there is because all the water that made the formations is up here. Down there is dry, barren, as well as that it goes down to about 2 feet tall, so it'll be pretty hard to navigate. And with all of that, I'll point out we have another wish light, so please watch your heads and let's continue onwards.
Yo, this is crazy.
You alright, babe?
So look at this. Oh, look at that mushroom. You alright, babe?
I'll be alright.
Yeah, that's...
Hold on, Dale.
That's another light. And this is what they called the bacon.
Alright. So we now move from our smallest room in the entire cave to our biggest room in the entire cave. And the first thing I'll point out is we have a great view of the drop rocks we're just under. You might even be able to see all the way up to the ceiling that once fell from. But if you can't, that's alright. Because we're going to get a way better look at this drop rock later on in our tour. But now moving back to this room. Welcome everybody to the Crystal Ballroom. There are 2 parts to that game, so we'll break it down one by one. First off, we have crystal. Well, if you look all along the wall here, you can see a series of sparkles.
Oh, I see.
And you're going to notice this is a common theme. Just about all of our stories start this way. When those 2 farmers were first exploring, and they shone their candles against the wall, well, they noticed it too. And they thought they had found diamonds. They thought they had struck it rich. So they carved out a huge chunk of the wall right in here, and they brought it to a local jeweler. The local jeweler began to wash them, and they found they dissolved underwater. Not diamonds. Those farmers were pretty disappointed. But because these are vulnerable to water, and of course, like I said, they're not diamonds, they are in fact calcite crystals. And this is the only spot in the cave where we see this type of crystal. That's only because of this large ledge that sits above and blocks the water from falling down onto them. As well as that though, we have another type of crystal in this very room that is quite the opposite. If we look all along the wall here, you can see 8-sided or aragonite crystals. And aragonite crystals are the opposite because they only form under water. So because we see aragonite crystals up here and in other spots throughout the cave, you can tell that most, if not all, of the cave was once totally submerged underwater. And we'll get a better look at that later, and we'll get more on how the cave was formed because we see these aragonite crystals. But now the next part is the ballroom. It's the second half of the name, and you might be wondering how that applies.
Second half, Jesus.
Well, back before the gift shop out there was a gift shop, when it was still just the inn, people would come to stay from far away. Maybe even New York City by stagecoach, like we got to see in the video. But they wanted some entertainment, and they wanted a way to cool down. And what better way to do that than come down into the cave? At that point would have been about 1.5 feet of mud. So they covered up wooden planks. They set up a band right back here. So as you can say, it was the first rock band. Maybe they brought in the Rolling Stones. And they also set up a concession stand right back here, where they would serve a variety of drinks, mostly on the rocks. Don't worry, folks, you mostly went through already. Not many more of those jokes coming out. And they would dance the night away. So this would go for a while. How can they dance at the party? You might be wondering, with all these things, was there ever any more special events? And the answer to that is yes. There's local weddings and baptisms right on the Royal Standard. The first wedding would happen in 1919 and would become known as the Bridezilla wedding. That's because the bride demanded that a baby grand piano be brought in to play a 5-minute bridal march. And so, she would end up getting what she wanted. They would hire 4 men to carry this 1,000-pound piano all night, known as altar rock. This is the largest stalagmite in the entire cave. And yes, it was used. So because of that, it doesn't have any stalactites above it. It's not getting the water or the minerals it needs, and it's considered a dead formation. Altar rock will never grow. It will slowly hollow out, crack apart, and fall. But either way, it did its purpose, and it has quite the legacy. And the next thing, you can see right overhead, a long crack that stretches the ceiling. And that's because Crystal Caves is part of the Pennsylvania Blue Ridge fault line. And hearing that, and knowing about fault lines and earthquakes, you might wonder what an earthquake would be like down here. Well, a few years back, about 2011, we found out that a 3.9 magnitude earthquake centered in Washington, D.C., and you would still feel it out here as a 2.5. And out the end, things would be shaking and falling, and people would be panicking. Down in the tour group, down in the cave, there were 2 tour groups. And they reported not feeling a thing. So, because of that, believe it or not, scientists found out that a cave is one of the safest places to be in the event of an earthquake. And so with that, I have another tip for you guys. If it's a lesser earthquake, maybe a 4 and under, then sure, you can hide in the cave for a bit. You'll stay out of the mayhem. But if it's a bigger earthquake, like we dislodged the giant drop rock up here, then maybe stay away from the cave for a bit. And with that advice in mind, we are going to head on up to the set of steps. Like I said earlier, feel free to use a handrail and take your time. No injuries allowed.
so this is actually pretty cool. I had to pause the video because I wanted to get every detail as possible to show to you guys about this. Like, Jesus, I'm gonna kill my camera. But this is actually this is my first time doing this. The title will be my first time ever going to Crystal Cave, which it is. Hold up. This is pretty insane. Like this a lot.
We'll give you a chance to come back to that. First off, rest
Looks like a
assured,
hand.
that's the greatest distance we've ever been stopped. You guys made it. Good job. While we're here, we'll get a chance to breathe.
Jesus.
All right, fantastic. So while we get that chance to breathe, I'm going to start pointing a few things out. Beginning with the curving stalactite you see over here. This is a formation known as a stalactite. Why it forms and curves like that, I don't know. There's several theories to it. Also,
I'm gonna
the
make a
metal
picture
touching
soon
down
as well.
throughout, being called